Meanwhile, Defense Secretary James Mattis is putting pressure on members of NATO.
That's right. In a closed session, Mattis said that the American taxpayer can no longer carry a disproportionate share of the defense of Western values, and that each of your capitals needs to show support for our common defense. David Martin is at the Pentagon. So, David, tell us more about General Mattis's remarks.
Well, this is a long-standing issue with NATO. All of the members of NATO have formally committed to spending 2% of their GNP on defense, but not all members of NATO have met that commitment. And of course, the U.S. spends much more than 2% of its own GNP on defense. And so what Mattis is saying here is, if you don't pony up and meet this 2% threshold, we're going to lose political support in the United States for NATO. He's not making any threats that the U.S. is going to pull out of NATO or anything. In fact, he has said while he's in Brussels that this is a bedrock alliance, and he says that having been a senior NATO commander during his military career. But this is a long-running issue for really as long as I've been covering the Pentagon, about whether all members of NATO are paying their fair share, because they're democracies. They have the same political fights that we have in the United States over defense spending. Of course, we had sequester here in the United States. They have their own politics, and sometimes even when a government tries to meet the 2% benchmark, the political process in that country just won't let it. So this is not a new concern by the United States, although it's sort of given relevance, particular relevance, by the fact that as a candidate, President Trump loudly complained about members of NATO not carrying their fair share, and it's true. But that does not necessarily mean that the U.S. is going to back away from the alliance.
Yeah, he didn't just loudly complain. He called the organization obsolete. So I'm sure it was heartening to hear it being described as a bedrock alliance for some of the members of NATO. But moving forward now, what do you suppose this all means in terms of the future of U.S. involvement in NATO? Well,
I can't speak for President Trump. I don't know if he has anything in mind about NATO, but I know as far as the Defense Department is concerned, there's no backing away from NATO. I mean, we depend on NATO not only to defend Europe, which is once again becoming an issue. I mean, there's no longer the threat of a Russian tank army coming barreling across the Fulda Gap into Germany, but there is the everyday threat of this sort of a hybrid warfare that the Russians have invented, in which you try to subvert the countries along your border using cyber attacks, trying to influence elections, and that has the countries along the Russian border very worried. And you've seen in the past couple months the deployment of thousands of American troops and a lot of equipment into Eastern Europe. Those were all things that were started during the Obama administration after Russia's annexation of Crimea. And I have absolutely no indication that they're not going to continue during the Trump administration.
And David, that was going to be my question with regards to the Russians. One of the things that has been noted, and you will know this as well, is Vladimir Putin has sought over the last couple of years to weaken NATO. He's sought to weaken the European Union. He's suggested that Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria, stay in power, even though there have been numerous atrocities alleged to have been committed by him. These are the things that Russia is hoping for and in the United States and in President Trump, you have President Trump supporting the Brexit decision. You have President Trump supporting the idea that the United States can perhaps work with Russia when it comes to Syria. And as Anne-Marie suggested, this question with regards to NATO. I wonder if sources at the Pentagon are worried about not the NATO situation as much, because it's clear that General Mattis says that that's going to be an integral part of our foreign policy. But I wonder if they're feeling like some of these things that are happening may in fact put the United States at a greater risk than it was probably in previous 8 years or so.
Well, there's no question you're looking at a resurgent Russia. Russia has just signed an agreement with Syria to expand that naval base they're using on the Mediterranean coast, through which they're sending in all the equipment that's being used to support Assad. And now they're about to sign a long-term lease, which gives them the right to expand that base. So, and the number of exercises that the Russians are conducting along their border with NATO has increased, and the size of the exercises has increased. But there's one catch to this whole idea of a resurgent Russia, and that is that as long as these sanctions remain in effect, and as long as oil prices remain in their currently depressed state, the Russian economy is not in good shape. And you can pour it all into your military, but at some point something's got to give. And of course, that is basically what happened with the fall of the Soviet Union. Their economy was in such disrepair that they could no longer afford to try to keep up with American technology, and they basically lost the arms race with the United States. And I think most people in the Pentagon would tell you that Russia right now just doesn't have long-term staying power to pose a lasting military threat to the United States. If you were to ask people in the Pentagon which country they're most worried about, it would be China, not Russia.
David Martin reporting for us from the Pentagon. David, thank you.
Sure thing.